Hey y'all, Data Guy here. And today I have a video for you where I'm just going to be going through some of the top CI/CD tools and really just discussing their, overall setup, how they work, and some of their advantages and disadvantages. I just came across this poll that just goes over, hey, what are some of the top CI/CD tools currently used, and something really I think should be on the topic of every developer's mind, anyone that's really working with code, because CI/CD used to be kind of the purview of software engineers and agile development and really complex things. But as just the data ecosystem has progressed, now you have data engineers, data analysts that all need to write and push code and constantly update it. And having systems to manage that is super important. So that's why I wanted to make this video just to list out, maybe the top eight of these tools, so you have an idea of, hey, these are the tools that might work really well for my use case. Maybe they don't, so that you don't get stuck investing a lot of time in a tool that doesn't really actually fit your needs. So without further ado, let's get into it with our first CI/CD tool, which is going to be Jenkins. So first one, Jenkins, is an open source automation server that is used for continuous integration and continuous deployment and delivery. So it's written in Java. It provides over 1,000 plugins that allow you to support building and testing any project. So if I just go to browse here, you can see you have all these different plugins that you can use to build on the backs of others, have things that, someone's already built a branch API to allow you to, have branch steps within your CI/CD pipelines. And so it makes it really easy to kind of start from zero and get to a working CI/CD pipeline, because you don't have to develop all these features and functionality yourself. You can just build on things that people have already done. And so, as you can imagine, because you have all these plugins, because it is open source, it's really extendable to almost any phase of the software delivery process, including building, testing, deploying, and supports a ton of different project languages, source code repositories, and is just generally really, really customizable. And obviously, this has a web interface. You can configure everything within, and it really just relies on having that plugin architecture provide a lot of the extensibility and flexibility, which allows it to fit in almost any CI/CD requirement. However, with all these advantages, highly customizable, extensive plugin ecosystem, strong community support, the disadvantages here are that it is quite a complex setup and also a complex setup to maintain, and has kind of a steep learning curve here. So because you have all these different plugins, you have all these different amazing ways to interact with the tool, it just requires you have to learn each individual plugin. The plugins don't often have the best documentation. So while there is, it has a high ceiling, it also has a very low floor, where if you don't have the necessary resources or experience to set it up efficiently, you can kind of get caught lost in the sprawl of, just having to spend a ton of time actually setting up Jenkins and not accessing all the benefits. So if you have the experience, if you have the time to invest, it can be really good, especially if you have some really, edge of the curve needs in your CI/CD pipeline, or you're working with less supported languages or tools. Now, our second tool is kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from Jenkins, and that is TravisCI. So with TravisCI, it's really all about being really easy to set up and use. It integrates well with GitHub, so if you're already using GitHub, it is a very simple thing to add onto it. You can see, you have code less, deploy more is their tagline here. So it just requires a lot less code, because you have a lot of these automations that are built into TravisCI to actually use. It's free for open source projects, and has some or dozens of ready-made integrations. So you're looking at thousands of plugins versus maybe a couple hundred integrations, but those 100 integrations are going to be much easier to use than having to set it all up within your Jenkins pipeline. Not to just keep bashing on Jenkins, but this is just kind of an easier setup. But with that ease of use comes limited customization options, and it also is more expensive. If you're, Jenkins is purely open source, you're setting up and you're maintaining that yourself. TravisCI has, cloud enterprise offerings where you can just kind of offload a lot of that work onto TravisCI, but obviously is going to be more expensive for some of those private projects. So it's kind of two, tools that I wanted to start with to just kind of showcase, hey, here are the two ends of the spectrum where you have less customizable, more, just black box solutions, and really customizable open source, solutions that you just have basically build for your own use case yourself. Next, we have CircleCI. So CircleCI is one of the more modern continuous integration tools that is really just used, automates the build, test, deployment processes. It is Dockerized. It's really built around Docker, and runs jobs in clean container or virtual machines. So you take your code, and then CircleCI will run that code in a specified virtual machine that maybe simulates a production environment, and it's really designed for enterprise grade testing, having the ability to set up these really custom machines, but without really needing to do a lot of the backend architecture, build the plugins yourself like you would with Jenkins. And you configure these pipelines with a YAML file, which allows for more fine-grained control, over your build environment, your workflows. You can really customize, hey, what is this testing environment going to look like? How do I want to actually test these packages? And it integrates well with, GitHub, with Bitbucket, and is known for it's really fast and efficient at running pipelines. You can see, a lot of these customer testimonies are around, hey, I can do things a lot faster. I can provision, these custom environments that are able to quickly spin up, run my tests on the compute that they need, and then give me a response whether or not this is successful or a failure. And so really good for machine learning workflows too, where you need those kind of containerized environments. But with kind of the setup there, it is somewhat limited in its configuration. Like, I actually wouldn't even say limited. It's just complex to configure. You kind of have to learn the CircleCI way of configuring, in that YAML file. If you don't like using YAML files, probably not going to love using CircleCI. And it doesn't really have a limited free tier. So you can see, like, even here, it's just pricing. Like, yes, there is a free tier, but it quickly goes up to, hey, performance, which is actually you're gonna have to pay for more because pay as you go, and they'll host the testing environments for you. They have these cloud offerings. Then you have Circle or self-hosted, where you basically have a walled off version of CircleCI, but a lot of people will use their cloud offering where you can completely offload the work of setting up these testing environments to CircleCI. Next here, you have GitLab CICD. So here, this is essentially a integrated tool for the GitLab ecosystem. So if you're already using GitLab, really easy to layer on top of this. And it's a great tool for software development because it covers the entire software development lifecycle in a single application. And so what this will done here, if you similarly to TravisCI and CircleCI, you have this YAML file. You define the different configuration states of, hey, this is the pipeline that I want to set. These are the environments that I want to be configured. These things that need to be installed. So you can see different environments here, and it supports parallel and sequential job execution, and has a bunch of different features around manual job controls, environments, deployments. I mean, you can see here just even in the basic reference architecture, there's a ton of different things that you can actually define just in a basic YAML file. And this doesn't even include bringing in your own custom testing configurations or anything like that. And so a lot of different features, really good for tools that are already using GitLab because it provides a unified experience. But similarly to Jenkins, this is an open source project. It's quite complex to set up on your own. You can see, you have, like, let's say I want to install, you have, GitLab as a SaaS subscription, but most people will generally try to self-host it themselves. And it just is a little bit of a hassle. You're going to have a lot of different things that you're going to just like stand up on your own to actually run GitLab CI/CD pipelines. So it's good for if you have complex workflows. If you really need to have that kind of fine-grained configuration, you are already using GitLab, you're experienced with kind of the pros and cons of these open source software. But for beginners, it can be quite overwhelming, and it also requires a lot of resources, especially if you're self-hosting, to actually run these CI/CD pipelines. So you have, again, similar kind of trade-offs to something like Jenkins there, where it's, a little more open sourcey and, has more of a steep learning curve. Now, next tool is GitHub Actions. And so this is something that I've actually used a lot because I find it very easy to set up, where GitHub just has a built-in tool for setting up GitHub Actions, which are essentially, you could have things like, hey, when I create a new dev branch, I want to spin up a Docker container, run some code on there, change the environment variables to my development variables, And then once I merge that into main, take that code from its development environment, push it into production. And so if you're already managing, your CI/CD lifecycle with GitHub and, doing, dev branches, having branch-based deployment, which is, modern best practices, managing it, GitHub Actions is great at having kind of all those downstream actions occur after you do something like merge a pull request, right? And it's really well integrated into GitHub Actions. You can also use GitHub code spaces here to actually run some of these as well. And so if you're using GitHub, if you're really familiar with the ecosystem there, it's really, really a great tool. It supports a ton of different languages, a ton of different platforms. The only real downside, or I guess two downsides, is number one, it's very limited to GitHub repositories. If you're not using GitHub, if you can't use GitHub, you're not going to have a good time using GitHub or trying to use GitHub Actions. I mean, that's kind of obvious. And you can see here, on push. So it really is reliant on having kind of GitHub be core to your CI/CD workflow. And it's a little bit less mature than others. So it doesn't have things like CircleCI where I can spin up a testing environment and then run some testing in there. So you will need to have the ability to, hey, I need to have a separate environment where I'm actually running this and build out some of that additional functionality yourself. So it's not quite as, customizable or extensible as some of the other options, but it's really good at just making simple GitHub-based workflows based on, branch-based deployments and ideas around that. Next, we have Bamboo from Atlassian. And Bamboo is really kind of a one-stop shop for, you have a continuous integration and deployment and continuous deployment server that's just dedicated for having your automated building, testing, releasing all in one place. And integrates well with other Atlassian tools like Jira, like Bitbucket, and has a seamless experience for people that are working really within the Atlassian ecosystem. So it has, a lot of features where you can do real-time monitoring, you can do automated merging, a lot of triggers. However, it's very much a commercial product. It's quite expensive. Yes, you can try it for free, but like even down here, for one data center with one remote agents, it's going to cost $1,200, 5 remote agents, 500, so this is the amount of people you want to be able to interact with this. It's incredibly expensive. And it's really only designed for people that are using, Atlassian systems already, because it just fits in really well to those systems. So if you're not using Atlassian, there's not really much reason to try and use Bamboo unless you're going all in on it. It's more expensive and it's also much less flexible. There's not really like the concept of plugins here. It's very much just focused on managing, fully Atlassian compute or tech stacks. So it's really good for that, but outside of that, it's really going to struggle. Now, TeamCity is our 7th CI/CD tool on the list. This is developed by JetBrains, and it is quite a powerful build management and continuous integration server, similarly to kind of Bamboo, but less locked in just to, only Atlassian stacks, obviously. And it's got good out-of-the-box support for .NET and Java platforms. So if you're working with those kind of platforms, this is a really good tool for that. It's quite easy to get started with it. It's got a pretty user-friendly interface. It's not really designed, like Jenkins, just for the really hardcore professionals. And it also gives you, the ability to run parallel builds simultaneously across multiple platforms. And it also supports Kotlin, which is kind of a pipeline as code language for you to define your actual pipelines. But you can also create them just via the web UI as well. And you can see you have really nice UI, really good analytics. You can kind of see your pipelines visualized, configuration as code. You can also use you can't use YAML code here. You got to use kind of this Kotlin language. So there's a bit of a learning curve there. And you're also, the free version is quite limited, so you're probably going to have to pay for it. And so that's really the only downside, is just a little bit complex setup because you have to learn Kotlin. But once you've done that, there's a lot of user-friendly features that allow you to kind of build these pipelines via the UI, not necessarily needing to get super deep in the code. And then also just a fully built-in monitoring suite, so you don't have to worry about building that yourself or like monitoring logs all day. You can actually just kind of see more of a visual representation of it all. Now, finally, I have Semaphor. And Semaphor is actually the only CICD tool I actually hadn't heard about with this before I started researching for this video. And this is just a cloud-based, not just, it's a cloud-based continuous integration and deployment service that really focuses on speed and simplicity. And so here, have a lot of large companies that trust us, but it's really all about, hey, we want to be able to run this super fast, have really customizable workflows, while also maintaining a high degree of visibility and having kind of a one-stop shop platform for doing all of it. But big selling point here is also for them that they have a lot of experience and just references, so that'll allow you to get faster results with CI/CD on Semaphor. And so you can kind of see it's the best. It has a lot of these like enterprise grade features built in. So they're built for, I would say, more advanced CI/CD users, but they have a lot of features that help you get to that level of advance, where you have a larger company, and you can see run it your way, infrastructure as code, always fun. It goes back to that kind of standard YAML file, which you'll find in a lot of CI/CD tools, and has just a lot of kind of structure around it that helps you automate these processes. Like, hey, I want to select how many parallel instances to run. Just drag a slider. And there's also native Docker support. So you have the flexibility to use custom Docker containers, complex applications. You can either host it with Semaphor or on your own software. And you also have a lot of, obviously having configurations to keep everything locked down. However, with all these great features, all this kind of UI and ability to run and all this customization and, having Semaphor actually manage like the Dockerized workflows can be quite pricey. And it is also usage based. So if you're using it a lot, it's going to become even more costly, which I think is a good model. Everything should be usage based because that's how much you're actually using it. So you should pay that amount. And so it has a lot of these tools, but there is a bit of a learning curve to actually know how to use these effectively. So that is both an upside and a downside here. And it also doesn't have quite as many integrations as more of an open source tool like Jenkins would have, which can be a limitation. If you need to rely on a lot of external terms, integrating with your CI/CD tool. Semaphor is really designed as, hey, this is your one-stop shop where you're going to have everything here to test. You're not really going to be calling out to external tools. So that's kind of the plus and minus there. And with that, that is our last CI/CD tool that I'll be discussing today. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found it helpful. I had quite a fun time actually making it. And above all else, have an amazing rest of your day. Data Guy out. Peace.